All right.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is now 7 p.m. and we are live.
Okay. Evening, everyone. So this is a council workshop. I just want to remind everyone. So a council workshop is not a formal meeting. We don't do a pledge. We don't do the other things that we would do at a normal, regular council meeting. As a workshop, this is an opportunity for the city and the council here to discuss and think through what issues we're doing and to line up what we want to do at a formal meeting. As a result, there's no public comments. Certainly it's a public meeting. Everyone is welcome to be here, but I would just encourage everyone that the decorum of a meeting at this type is that it's our job to go through the items and to discuss, and it's not for the audience to do so. Okay? Roll call. I see everybody. Is that good enough? I see the entire council. I see the city administrator. And online we have.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Nicholas Ward Willis with Keenan Bean.
Okay.
And my colleague Christian Gates is here as well. He'll be joining us.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. Christian Gates with Keenan Bean as well.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Thank you both. I understand Natalie Quinn, our new city planner, is on vacation. And so I think, Nick, you're going to fill in on stuff that she might be involved in. So the first item to work on is just minimum parking requirements. And Nick, are you going to take that up?
I can, Mayor. Thank you. So at the last City Council workshop, we discussed the proposed amendments to the city zoning code regarding regulation of off-street parking. As this is on for a continuation of the public hearing for next Monday night's meeting. At the last council meeting.
Next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday's council meeting, my apologies. And at the last council meeting, Mayor, you had broken up the discussion into the off-street parking requirements for residential, for single family and 2 and 3 family, and then versus non-residential for the multifamily and the other non-residential uses. Council also had a discussion about a parking fee in lieu of, and we went through what the proposed changes were in the local law. And this is a change to give the planning board the flexibility to determine parking, and so that it's not going to be regulated on a strict per use requirement, but rather the planning board would have the authority to determine on a per use basis what the appropriate parking is. So in your packet for tonight's meeting is some revised materials. There's a memo from our office with some more information from what the building inspector provided the council with respect to granting of parking waivers by the planning board. The building inspector gave you a memo that you discussed last time with respect to the parking waivers granted for certain projects. Our office then provided you with some more details as to the nature of those projects, so you could put the parking spaces in the waiver into its appropriate context. We also provided you, and Natalie Quinn, your city planner, did as well, information regarding this concept of a fee in lieu of, so that if off-street parking is not provided, that they would pay a fee. And we provided you with our copy of our 2015 memorandum, as well as a draft local law we had prepared at that time, as well as some examples of other municipalities and how they address the parking fee concept in lieu of, that you pay the fee instead of providing off-street parking. And then today I provided you with just an extract from the local law concerning the regulation of maximum off-street parking guidelines for non-residential uses. And so with the public hearing coming up on the 26th, the current state of the local law is as it was drafted for the prior work session, so it does not include any of the more recent discussions that we have had. And so I'm hoping at the close of this, I will have some guidance from the council as to whether you want the local law to be the subject of next week's public hearing, next Tuesday's public hearing, to be the one that was in your packet, or for any edit that you would like to that local law. That, Mayor, is where we are with tonight's discussion and focus.
Okay. Can we pick them up a topic at a time? So on the residential single-family neighborhoods, any issues with where we are?
Certainly no issues with having that be what the public is aware of. Do you want to state that again, just for anyone who's listening in?
Nick?
Nick?
Yeah, so with respect to the residential, and I apologize, I don't fully have that in front of me because I'm off site and getting ready for another meeting because I have a conflict tonight. Christian, do you have that in front of you with respect to the chart that we have, or Ben, if you're able to put that up on the screen?
If you give me 20 seconds, I can pull it up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Christian, you do have ability to share a screen if that's helpful for you.
I've got a lot of
Sure, I think-
screens in front of me. It's found in our office's memorandum dated January 26, 2024.
Right.
Yeah.
Presently, one family dwelling units are required to have 2 total spaces. The proposed local law would set it at 1 space. The proposed guidance for maximum would be 3 spaces. That's for 1 family houses. For 2 family, the current minimum is 4 total spaces. And then the proposed minimum would be 2 total spaces. And there you go. Thank you, Ben.
Great.
Right, so, looking at the table, in a residential neighborhood, a one-family currently requires at least 2, a two-family at least 4, and an ADU at least 1, right? And we're saying 2, 4, 1 would go to 1, 2, and 1. So a one-family would have a minimum of 1, and a two-family would have a minimum of 2, and an ADU would still have a minimum of 1. There's also would be new, which is the third column, is proposed guidance for a maximum. That you would not, as guidance, have more than 3 on a one-family, more than 6 in a 2, and 1 total space in ADUs.
And I think what we talked about last time with the last column, that's what the planning board could require. So it's not that an individual property owner couldn't build a garage for their 6 cars. It's that the planning board would not require them to do that.
Right,
Correct. Correct.
right. Right, so if you wanted to build 10, that's up to you. Okay? But the maximum, the guidance on a maximum is the maximum, the guidance for the planning board is the maximum they would require, and they don't have to follow the guidance either. Is that what we're saying, Nick, on this one?
Well, correct. It is guidance for them. They could, if the circumstances justify it, exceed that or require less, but that is the guidance that we want them to follow. If they were to deviate from that guidance, we want them to justify and explain why.
Okay. Is everybody good with those?
Yes.
Okay. So do we want to pick up the non-Main Street section or the section where properties have sufficient space for parking? I think that's how we're dividing it. Properties that do versus properties that don't, outside of the residential neighborhoods.
Are you talking about residential multifamily properties or commercial spaces?
So I think what we said before was just trying to divide the problem into parts, that we didn't have a clean division between a new development, for instance, the one on the corner of Conklin and Fishkill Avenue, where a multifamily is allowed. It's a multi-use zoning. So not counting the R1s or the R1s and 2s, because there are, no, I don't think we have any R2s, but in our R1s where we have 1s and 2s, we deal with those. Of the remaining ones that allow for additional units, I think we want to divide the world into those that can do their own parking versus those that can't, right? And we know that most of those that can't do their own parking are in Main Street, but we also said that there might be some areas where there are other spots where they can't do their own parking. Don't know. But I thought what we were saying is let's make the dividing point those 2, right? Can do their own parking, can't. And therefore, anything we do for Main Street would also apply if there happens to be another section, like in the transition zone or somewhere, where there might be an issue of providing your own parking. Is that okay?
Yeah, but and maybe I'm just overthinking it a little bit. If we do it that way, wouldn't we then need to designate by each zone? As opposed to saying some kind of definition that's, oh, this property can or cannot meet the guidelines and so it falls into this. I don't disagree with your approach, but I think that means that we would have to analyze each, RD1, RD2, CMS, transitional, like you would have to take it zone by zone if that's the approach, unless I'm missing something.
No, that's a fair statement. So here's what I would propose. We talk about them in those 2 buckets without defining them yet, right? And then once we talk about them, right, here are the buildings that have spaces, here are the ones that don't, agree on what those are, I would propose we do two things to define the dividing line, right? Which is look at the zones and see if an entire zone can be put into one category or the other.
Right.
And if it can't, we also say that there is some kind of an out clause that we put in it that says, okay, if you're not in ones that specifically are considered out, if you can't, then here's the process. Right? Maybe we could do it that way. Would that work?
Yeah, and I just say that, just to give some reasoning to my thinking, is because I think that we want to provide the planning board with enough tools. And so leaving it to, okay, your first step is, can they or can they not meet the parking, then just is exactly the same thing that happens today.
Yeah, it might be.
We also do have a parking district overlay, which I think we talked about recently, and we're like, what was the purpose of this? But maybe this is the purpose of that parking district overlay, is that it helps to identify those parcels. It would involve us having to go through a more comprehensive process to review that district, so to Amber's point, that still might be more than we want to do at this point, but in reading through what came from 2015, it seems like that was the intention of that overlay.
Yeah, I think it was, if I remember, that's kind of like the Henry Street area. And just thinking back to when we did use and dimensional tables, that was kind of the thought, that there was more parking there that could be stood up, for lack of a better word, so.
Because it wasn't defined. I think we stripped that from the code
No,
last
I
year.
was-
Did we?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I think
Okay.
we got rid of it, and
Yeah.
now I'm like,
While you
oh,
were
wait.
off- Yeah.
It was removed in one of your recent amendments last year because it was not utilized or in the code.
Right. Because we weren't doing parking or parking fees in lieu of.
It
I
referred
think.
to it,
That's
but
right.
that it was nowhere
Yeah.
else in the code.
Yeah, so I'm not
That's right.
suggesting that is a model we could return to, but it might not be, to Amber's point, worth our capacity, so.
I wanted to bring up one additional piece of that puzzle, which I believe Pam brought up in workshop last time, which is making sure there's a consideration across zones on access to municipal parking when we're determining whether a development can or cannot provide their own parking, as I understand this conversation, and what they might do in lieu. I think that municipal parking needs to be considered separately, or in its own bucket.
Well, that's what I noticed, even when you're looking at the waivers, it was always referring to you were 500 feet within municipal parking, you were 800 feet from, do we have to go by zone, or incorporate thinking of you're within so many feet of municipal parking or shared parking?
So it sounds like we're saying that part of the mix of how we define this will be, if they can't do their own parking, access to municipal parking is relevant there, right? In areas where they can do their own parking, do their own parking. Is that right, still?
I think that's an important consideration.
Okay. Okay. Do we want to pick one or the other? I think the easier one is the places where parking, there's room for parking, right? So let's not deal with Main Street first. Let's deal with everything else. Is that okay? All right. Where do we think we're going on that? Is there something in the law currently on that, Nick or Christian, that could help out?
Not to my recollection, no, because we're just talking about uses. We weren't talking about the availability, and it was giving flexibilities.
So
there's
what if
no
we?
language that existing addressing that point.
Okay. So I think in the proposed legislation, since it removes the parking requirement in the non-R1 neighborhoods, that our options are to leave it that way, right? We've removed the parking minimum. It's up to the planning board to sort out. Another option might be, well, if they're small, like what if it's only 4 units? Does the parking board have to make a determination, or might we have a rule for small numbers and then leave it up to the planning board for anything above that? That's an option. And then in addition, do we provide any guidance, right? I think those are the issues on that side. And we're picking them up okay?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, where are people on not having a minimum in the areas involving multifamily where there's room for parking? Because I'm okay with that part.
The one thing that I would like clarity on is what happens when we have a day like today where we got 10 inches of snow and everybody's going to, you can't go to the street, they've got to go to municipal. When do they have to get out of municipal? And are we, I mean, it already sounds like we're having issues now. So I feel like if we're, you know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but if we have less parking requirements, because you're saying there's parking within, you know, there's street parking, but yet when you have to get off the street, there's a problem.
So I think you're ahead of us, right? Because those would be the areas that don't have their own parking. What we're talking about are lots where there's going to be a development where there is enough room for parking. And what we found in those developments is that we're overbuilding the parking, right? So if we reduce the parking, hopefully we do it in a way smart enough where we're not causing people to go onto the streets, right? Now, they have to handle their own snowplow and everything, so I don't know how they do that, but, all right, the situation.
Private parking.
Yeah, the situation you're raising is, no, I'm right off Main Street, I don't have enough room to park, right? I try parking on the street, I gotta get off the street, I gotta go to a municipal lot. I think we'll pick that up later, in the next bucket.
To this bucket, I think Nick didn't have a chance to email this today, but I think what we talked about last time was we actually maybe, and some members of the planning board expressed maybe interest in this too, we do want to keep in some guidance for a minimum, even if we want to adjust what our current minimums are. I don't have any, I would personally need to have someone help me figure out what are the right minimums, given those lots that could fit what is currently our minimums. How do we want those minimums to change? And so I think I like the idea of, given where it seems like our planning board is now, to give them something to hang their hat on, and I'm not yet of a strong opinion or an informed opinion about what that should be.
So I'm of the opinion that if we are reducing the parking requirements and thus saving tens of thousands of dollars for developers, that they should give something back to the community. So I'd like to see that there's a public benefit tied to the waiving of any parking that they could build but don't want to build, or don't need to, they feel they don't need to build. So if there's some way that we can, save, we'll be saving them money under the hope that maybe they will create affordable housing with the money that they save. I'd like to somehow ensure that they're going to build affordable housing with the money that they save.
Yeah, the only issue I have there is if they say, well, if we write, you have to offer X, whatever the X is, or else we go back to the old requirements. I don't want the old requirements. That's the only problem.
Maybe so, but I just don't believe that that we're going to have a lot of people who are say, oh wow, the city saved me a lot of money on parking requirements. I'm going to go out and spend it on. I'm going to go and look, make my margins lower by building affordable housing. I think we have to kind of tell them that that's somehow what needs to be done. I just don't think that it's going to happen without any kind of enforcement.
And that's where I'm really interested in the payment in lieu of parking aspect of this, because public benefits are very important. I don't quite know what public benefits we would mandate.
It would include payment in lieu of parking.
Right, so if there's a payment in lieu of parking, then that becomes the city's discretion to an extent. I mean, if it goes in, you can't use it for anything you want, but it could go towards improvements to the city, improvements to our parking infrastructure, maybe some accessibility measures that we could consider. So that's kind of where I see threading that needle of public benefit with that parking in lieu of payment. And I say that with the caveat that, of course, you don't want to make the parking or the payment in lieu of parking so onerous that it is, negating any effect of the legislation. So it's a balance.
So I think what I heard you say is we might be able to do that idea where they have no parking, right? And in lieu of a fee, we might do something else, right? Like, give me an X.
Yeah, or we just have the straight fees, and if you're not meeting the minimum, you pay these fees. Perhaps it's a sliding scale of year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that it's not a huge upfront expenditure. But then that funding goes into something that the city can use to improve our infrastructure.
But again, I think that's bucket 3.
Sure.
We're a little ahead of ourselves, right?
Well, I
mean-
don't think it's necessarily bucket 3. I think that it's definitely would be more effective in bucket 3. But I agree with what I understand Dan to be saying, that if we're taking away a minimum, then that does still leave potentially funds on the table that could be directly benefiting the community. And I think it's about right-sizing the amount and the numbers, both the amount of dollars if we're talking about a payment in lieu of parking or another benefit, and not defaulting. Like, I agree with the we also don't want the outcome that you're suggesting might happen, Lee, where we end up with an excessive amount of parking
Right,
as well.
But that's what you're going to get, right? I mean, they have the land for the parking. The options are, we reduce the parking requirement, and they do this, right? And if you don't do this correctly, they're just going to build the parking. They
But
have
why would they build parking I mean, if the public benefit is a lower cost than the parking, why wouldn't they do the public benefit and look
Because
good?
currently, in the market, people are paying to come to Beacon, right? If we weren't an attractive community, you could make the argument that that would make sense. I mean, the data, I just saw an article that the city attorney sent in New York City. The number, they did a short-term rental, just like we did, and they required it to be owner-occupied. And the number of advertised short-term rentals, the Airbnbs, dropped in Brooklyn from 11,000 down to 1,000, which opened up 10,000 apartments in Brooklyn. It had an impact on rental prices, according to the article. Could you circulate that, Nick, to everyone?
Yes, yep, I'll do that tonight.
So I think you can't make the market do what it needs to do. We don't have the power to make a market work, all right? We have the power to do certain things, but then each person looking at those things decides what they want. And I think this is one where if we don't do it, they're just going to do the parking and you've gotten nothing out of it.
But wasn't the whole idea that we get the desired outcome, which was more affordable housing by waiving these parking minimums? This was originally part of the housing, the
Right.
list of housing proposals.
Yes, but a number of those things are trying to reduce the cost of development. That includes our zoning. If we can reduce the cost of development, that will drive the price down as the market starts to build housing. You can't guarantee it, right? But if tomorrow there were 800,000 extra units, which is what the governor wants in New York, rents would drop precipitously. So we need to figure a way to encourage those, and this is one way to do it. It's not the panacea, but I think it's one way.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about is the fourth floors on Main Street and the give and take, right? We said, we'll allow you to have a fourth floor, to have extra floor of rent. In return, you'll give something back to the community, and I see that exchange playing here as well. We're saving them tens of thousands of dollars. Presumably, I think what was the cost per parking spot? 25,000.
Yeah, it's a big
We're saving them
number.
$25,000 per parking spot. What do we get in return?
Right.
Congestion.
Okay. Again, you can propose to require it. I will oppose it because I don't think it actually makes any economic sense to say, I'm going to require this in order for me to reduce parking. We have the wrong parking requirements. Right now, we're building 2 and 3 and 4 spaces, where we should be building 1 or 2. And unless we change them, it's going to remain that way and be more expensive. We should just change it. That's kind of where I sit. Others may have different views. And we can put a pin in this and come back to it, or we can try to work it, whatever you think.
Mayor, just a data point. According to our city planner, the average estimated cost is $5,000 to $10,000 per parking space. The $25,000 to $50,000 is for structured parking, just so we have the right number.
And we do have case studies that were presented to us about where parking or payment in lieu of parking was implemented. I don't have a sufficient understanding of the impacts of that, but I am curious. you know.
I think-
Evaluation is going to be one of the themes that I'll bring up in this, you know, but maybe we could pass this, but I don't want to just have a nice to have, you know, evaluation in a qualitative sense down the road. If we're going to do anything, I want to make sure that there's a metrics tracking and a reporting about what the impacts are so we can make informed decisions.
Again, we can put a pin in this and keep talking around the other issues and come back. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Because I'm not sure we'll solve this one instantly. What I would suggest is maybe we can find some information of, is there evidence that, you know, when this occurs, that rates do change over time without a requirement that it happen, right? Because we could probably find some evidence of that. I think our planner would be able to help us. Right?
And Mayor, since the planner wasn't able to make tonight, I think the other piece of this was on Conklin Street, the excess of parking that was mandated reduced the amount of landscaping. It actually increased the amount of impervious surface unnecessarily. So that was the other thing that was flagged as part of that.
Yeah, that's an easier trade-off, right? Where you say, if you're not doing it, the land for this, you should do it for that. I think that's a cleaner one that I do like, and I appreciate you mentioning that.
And the planning board is already allowed to offer a banking of parking spaces if you're not yet sure that the development will actually use all of them. So the paving doesn't happen until there's been some actual evidence use. I'm actually not sure if they did that on Conklin or not, but that is a tool that they do already have in their toolbox if they choose to use it.
Nick, Christian, any
Don't know that
help on that?
No?
Well, land bank parking has been used around town, so one example. Recent examples, I'm not familiar with it. Again, we can ask and get some information.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I thought
Conklin
it was
did not.
used, okay, that's fine. I thought it was used on the West End lofts more recently.
The Beacon Lofts.
Yeah, I just don't
Like
recall.
The
Sorry,
hip,
there are too
the
many
hip
lofts.
lofts, yeah.
The ones along
Hip lofts
Fishkill
it
Creek.
was, yes.
And 152, 158, I think, had like 4 or 5 spaces.
In
So-
any case, yeah.
So here's what I hear, and I'm not trying to, you know, change the conversation. We have this issue here we want to pick up in bucket 2, right? Which is, do we get a give back or not? And does it make sense to do that? I also heard that, do we want to have some guidelines? So I think even if we pull it out, right, we want to have some guidelines, maybe akin to what was put for housing, for single family, right? It said, here's a maximum. Well, maybe we would say a guideline on a minimum, right? We could probably find evidence on that. Would that make us all comfortable in bucket 2, right? Remove the minimum, have a guideline for a minimum, maybe a guideline for a maximum in those criteria that we offer up to the planning board, and then also address the issue that Dan's raising about a give, right? Did that help?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can get a list of all the, you know, perhaps Nick can even, or the planner could kind of put on the table, you know, here are all the different possible give backs, and here are the pros and cons of them, maybe, you know, we
Yep.
can just have an open discussion about them.
Yep, and I think also, too,
Understood, we can do that.
right? I think also, too, just to think about what would be guidelines for a minimum. You know, I would think ordinarily a half a space per unit would probably be some minimum that would make some sense. And I'm not a planner, but I would imagine that you might need a parking spot per unit, right? And so
Yeah, if
there's
we have
probably
that in our single-family zoning already, that might be a benchmark we want for our one-bedroom unit.
Yeah.
I'm hypothesizing, I'm not
Now,
saying it
if
should
we
be.
do that, it may in effect be, well, we didn't eliminate the minimums, we just reduced them. But, you know, that may not be a bad solution. The other thing we do is if we, you know, say, here's a guide, we put language around, there are times where you might go below the guide, but you should think really hard about it. Might be because there's, you know, good rapid transit, or they did a bunch of this, or it's development right at the train station, and most people don't have a car, or something like that. So we could add to the guides something like that, and therefore that minimum wouldn't be an absolute. They'd still have some discretion. Would that be okay?
Right, and I think that fits with developers' own incentives, that the fewer parking units they have, the more they can convert that into housing, which is how they make their money. So they are going to be incentivized to look for the units, but the planning board can help to decide what actually makes sense, given where that lot is.
Right. Although you just reminded me, one thing that goes in our guidelines, I think is already there, Nick, is if the planning board wants their own expert, they can go get one. right? Is that right, Nick, Christian?
That's correct, yes. That is in there, yes, correct.
All right, so that, also if they're getting, they feel like they're being bamboozled and need an independent opinion, they can go get one. Okay.
We actually have a traffic consultant under contract.
Right, so it might also be that we want someone that can help us on parking if it's not
They
clear
do.
enough in the guidelines. Although I think it's simpler than traffic. Traffic's harder. So are we getting close to kind of defining the parameters of bucket 2?
I think so. Just one other question about bucket 2. Does that include when we're in an R zone and there's a special use permit that allows you to, like, for example, Edgewater built out to its maximum, built out to its maximum density in an R zone, right? With a special use permit?
I think it was an RD, but we have to investigate that piece of the puzzle. Nick, do we know that?
We don't, but that was an RD district.
RD.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to check what the Edgewater was, because
I just want to make sure we're accounting for every possibility that could come up in all the zones, not just the straight zoning, but what are the different special use permits. That was just an example.
No, I think that's
Okay,
absolutely right.
so yep, understood. We'll add that into the next memo or charter matrix that we provide for you. At this point, Mayor, I apologize. I'm going to turn over our city attorney responsibilities to my colleague, Christian.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. No problem. Okay, so I think it's going to take us a couple of rounds, but I think we're getting close to the high-level parameters, which is where we should be working, and then let the attorneys kind of do the details, right? I always get perplexed when I have to read their details and I don't get them, right? And this is a hard one. So, all right, so what I heard us say is we should also make sure that this works for various zones, right? Which we'll do a check of. Okay. Do we want to try bucket 3 for a little while? See where we get to.
Can I ask Pete to close the door to outside? Just getting a big draft. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready to move to bucket 3.
Just
though
the door to right
the
outside is open. You
outside.
can leave that open. Just the door that leads right into the parking lot is open. Oh, okay, never mind then. Forget it. Sorry. I'm sorry. I don't, leave it open.
We have the key.
Sorry. Yes, I'm overall ready to move to bucket 3, and also I would love to hear more from Jeff, if you're willing, about what kinds of metrics you're imagining and how that might fit into the conversation, because I'm also interested in that data and understanding the impact of.
I haven't done sufficient research on the types of metrics to include, but I'm including, it would be if we had a benefit payment in lieu of parking charge, how those dollars were being spent, what the impacts were on alternative development efforts by developers if they were not using the parking minimum. Tracking potentially I don't think we have historical trends on what's happened with affordable housing development, but it would be interesting to track it going forward, what kind of numbers we're looking at. So there's a number, but it's, this input's not very well informed. I would definitely come back with better numbers or suggestions.
Okay. So here's where I think we're at. We had a discussion on bucket 1, which is the residential neighborhoods, right? The single family, 2-family. We have to get our zones all aligned, right? But generally, and then we talked about the multifamily areas or commercial mixed-use areas where they have their own parking. And what we had as we thought were the parameters. Not every part of it's worked out just yet. Now we're turning to the third one, which is the Main Street and other places that just don't have their own parking. I will make the following suggestion, which is I don't know if we get through that bucket, but we could move the law forward on the other pieces because this might be more complicated. All right, so just think about that, and let's start up this one, and let's see how far we get, okay?
Yep.
So I think the issue here is, okay, whatever our parking requirements are, we could have 0, we could have a bajillion, they don't have any parking, right? Or they certainly don't have enough. A Main Street building's a classic example. What we have done in the past is we used to do a parking in lieu of fee, which was piddling. I think before we pulled it, if I remember, it was 1,500. Christian, you may not know history, that we pulled it because it just, wasn't even enough. We weren't isolating it into a parking fund. We were just putting it in the general fund.
Yep.
Was it even being collected?
I think it was being
It was?
collected, yeah.
Okay.
But we just said this is all silliness because we're not getting anywhere. So I think when we when we talked about the Main Street Access Committee, and one of their recommendations, and we even talked about it before, was whatever we do on Main Street, we should have a dedicated fund. So that was created, right? I think, Pam, you were on council when we did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we have a fund where those things should go into, and the use of those funds doesn't have to be parking, right? We could also make it transit or other things, but we said we're not going to just stick it in the general fund anymore,
Right.
right? So the second one is, the second piece, so we got a fund. Do we do a parking in lieu fee? How big should it be? Is it up front or is it an annual? I think that might be the next topic. What do y'all think?
So if it's a multifamily on Main Street, and we say it's annual, not one time, does that mean that family has to pay for not having parking?
So
Every
there's
year?
a couple of options, right? You could have the owner pay it,
Right.
right? Or you could have the owner pay a piece every year, and then, the other discussion that the Main Street Access Committee had, I don't think they went too far into the discussion, but one option was, look, if you're a tenant and you want a guaranteed space, we can charge a monthly fee, right? You'll get a guaranteed space, but you could do that as well, right? And so there's a couple of options, right?
There's also
Upfront fee.
parking permits, which
Yeah.
some municipalities have done. We have to ask the state for it, but it seems like it's a fairly straightforward process.
Okay, yeah.
What is that? Sorry.
That apparently in New York State, in order for municipalities to get the right to issue a parking permits, they have to first get the state to pass a law for it, but it's a fairly straightforward process. They did it recently in Rye. They might have done it in Cold Spring too, I'm not sure, but it's a formality that New York State has, so.
Okay.
And, I guess the way that I was thinking about payment in lieu of parking is that it's not necessarily a fee until the end of time that gets charged every year. It's kind of associated with whatever the planning board approval is. So it's a set amount, and you could prorate that over the course of a couple of years to make it less, upfront. But that was kind of my thought on how that works.
I kind of like the idea of an annual fee, because we have more control over it over the life. I hope these buildings last for decades, so, but I appreciate that's more effort than in our hand to manage it. It requires more ongoing management, so.
Yeah, it makes more sense to me since the impact of those parking spaces not being there presumably is felt indefinitely. Or not if we suddenly have the best local municipal transportation system in the world, but we're not there yet.
My thought is that an annual recurring fee just makes it very easy to tack that onto somebody's rent, as opposed to having a one-time upfront kind of penalty, for lack of a better word.
I think that happens either way, but I appreciate that argument too.
Yeah, the other one I do point out, which is not in our interest, which is commercial properties, including apartments of 4 units or more, pay our higher tax rate, right? Because we have a 2-tiered tax rate. The tax is about 50% higher. And so I think a fair argument from those owners would be a piece of it should come from the city. I actually buy into that argument, but I don't think that should cover all of it, right? Because this will be expensive. I think if we are, and again, I don't know the answer here, but if we're talking about a payment in lieu, right? We don't have to set that in this discussion. We can simply say it's part of the zoning and it will get set later, right? We may also put off, well, do we need any parking, right? Because I think Main Street Access said, don't do that first, right? So do that only after you capture as many spaces as you can on the street. If you need to control parking, you might do something else. I forget what round 2 was. Yeah, and then round 3, and only till you get there, was would you build something? So we might want to consider that, which is why I also suggested at the beginning of this, we may not be able to get through all of this bucket because it's complicated. But I think we should keep talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a fee that's more than $1,500 because we thought that it wasn't enough.
If it's a one-time.
And the cost, right, and the cost of a parking spot is $5,000.
Yeah.
up to $5,000. So we're talking somewhere between $1,500 and $5,000.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It might be more on Main Street, because, land might be more expensive there, right?
I don't know, yeah.
But we can get an estimate of what it would be if it's close to Main Street.
Yeah, I also think that, and we've seen this in studies, that the east end of Main Street's parking situation is way different than the west end. So in East End, I mean, you can't go anywhere at any hour and find parking, but at the west end, there's parking aplenty. And so I wonder if there's a way that we can fairly recognize that in some way. Perhaps, what's the average availability of a parking spot in one of the public parking lots? So for example, if you're over on the Eliza parking lot, parking's not so bad. The county parking lot, it's really easy, but the Van Nydek parking lot is impossible.
Yeah.
You don't even bother looking,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we should have some kind of consideration for that too.
And the other thing that I'm thinking about, which is, it has nothing to do with this, but it has everything to do with it. We are people parking in our parking lots and just leaving their car there. And nobody is gonna park in that spot because they just have that car, and because there's no repercussions other than maybe, even in the snow, they just have to get rid of it, within 24 hours. Is there something that we have to look at that opens up parking spaces? And then even for Main Street, that always, the enforcement, that's been 2 hours forever.
Yeah.
It goes in waves, whether it's enforced. I think if we're going to have just maximums, I think that has to be kind of thought of, and I don't know if the highway department or the building department have input on what they're seeing, or the police department for that matter, if that's an issue that we have to look at. And when is the time for paid parking?
All right, here's what I hear. All right, this is the complicated one, right? That's why we took it up last, and I also suggested we may break this off from the rest, right? I don't think we know if we need parking just yet, although I definitely say on the east end, we need something, right? So with respect to this law, I think what we could do is put in there a parking in lieu. We might, in another round of discussion, kind of confirm what kind of a fee is it, and is it spread over time or all up front. We could set a number, or I guess we could conceivably say that number is set by something else and get out of the business. But I think we could put a number like 5 in and start up. Even if we don't do any parking, we start to put the money in the fund, so at least it's been isolated, right, which it wasn't happening before. And then we'll start separately some effort to say, oh yeah, the East End really doesn't have parking, but these do. Is there something we can do? And maybe that starts up a project in a year or two.
Yeah, I don't know if we put the scope of this as we want to reopen what that fund can be used for, but I think by building infrastructure for alternative modes of transportation, we relieve the need for parking. So if we could somehow use it for striping bike lanes, et cetera, it would be really fantastic.
Right, so that says that the use of the fund we could keep separate from this law, right? We're just trying to do parking, right? But maybe that's how we split the puzzle up into parts and keep looking at it.
Yeah. And I mean, just to that point, Dan, I'll say again, I do think that we have an obligation as some kind of follow-up here, regardless of where the decision goes, to think about things like alternate transportation. How are we supporting biking, walking, buses, zip cars, whatever you want to throw in there. I think we all recognize that the infrastructure we have here does not necessarily support a completely car-free life, and there's more we can do there. So I just wanted to underline that, and I think it's an important follow-up for us to think about strategically.
Other thoughts? Again, I'm trying to keep this at a high enough level so we can make progress.
So just one last thing, and it may have already been added to the law, but last time we discussed this law, I brought up the idea of revisiting it. Like now Jeff's talking about metrics. Maybe we bake into the law that we come back to it in 2 years and look at the impact of it and see if we need to shift course, but we're kind of already discussing that, but it's something that I think we should put in. We did it for good cause eviction. We should certainly do it for this.
Or sooner.
Or sooner, I was just thinking about, I mean, I said 2 years because I was thinking about how long it takes for something to get through the building and planning process, but perhaps earlier.
There were a couple other things not related to these central questions. There was striking the 1964 provision. There was stuff about landscaping around parking spaces, reducing that number from 10 to 8. There was some talk about stormwater management. And so I like the idea of all those things I just named, and also I don't know if maybe I'm not sure if Nick and Christian are going to work on a law, just make sure, I think that's already in the version of it, or what's kind of actually going to be what we're presenting to the public for their feedback next week, and I'm interested in seeing if we can keep those things, but also I take the point that maybe this is not the time to try to do everything. So I'm just curious about that as well.
I think some of it's already in the law.
Yeah.
I think another thing, and I think it partly gets to what Molly's getting at, is that there's a lot of concerns in this area. Amber brought up one. We're talking about breaking it up now potentially if some parts are complicated, and I just want to make sure that we do get to all of them, and that we don't say we do the easy ones and then, we end up talking about something else for a while and never get to the other ones.
So here's what I heard and what I would suggest. I think the pieces that are in, as you say, are in, so we should leave them in, right? I think we should give our attorneys a round to kind of incorporate kind of high level what we discussed. And I think we're going to need another round for this, right? And so if the public hearing is sooner rather than later, I think we have to move that. What do people think of that?
When does the planning board weigh in again on this? I mean, it was a 3-2 vote last time, right, for
Tomorrow? Oh,
I
no.
don't know that they do. Like, is it on their agenda to
Unless
just
they
keep
give us
talking about it? That's a question
I
for
mean, would they not
Keenan
evaluate
Bean.
revised law to see how they feel about this responsibility?
Excuse me, Mayor, if I may, it would need to be referred back to the planning board for
Okay.
their comment.
Okay. And do we know when we adjourn the public hearing on parking? Was it for next week?
It's for
Yeah.
next Tuesday.
All right, so I would suggest at a minimum we put it off, I'd say for a month. But what do you all think?
The public hearing?
Yeah, the public hearing.
Yeah, and I don't think we have anything to send to the planning board just yet. I don't think our law is different enough than what they.
So it might be at the next workshop,
Yeah.
an action we can take is send it, if by then we have something that.
And it is not on their agenda for tomorrow.
Okay. So, yeah, because I think I heard enough changes where we could advance, like, and close off sections and say, all right, this part looks pretty good, this part looks pretty good, and then we'll whittle it down to the Main Street, type, don't have my spaces. And then we'll focus again on that in terms of policy. And then we can also start buttoning up our, which zone does this apply to and other elements along the way. But I think it's going to take a little while. We okay?
I agree with that plan.
Okay. A month is all right?
I think that's a good target. That keeps it moving.
All right, so one thing we'll put on for the agenda, everybody okay, is that we'll shift the on Monday's meeting, we'll shift the public hearing back a
Tuesday.
month. On Tuesday's meeting. We'll shift it back 29 days.
Do we have to vote? We have to vote on that? No?
Next week.
Next
Yeah.
week.
Yeah, I think we have to vote on the
But everyone okay
adjournment.
with that here in workshop?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I actually think we advanced the ball, right? Christian, just say yes. Even though you,
Yes, you did.
okay.
So that would put this on for March 18th.
Okay. And then in the meantime, that sounds right, yes. In the meantime, do you have enough information to work with Christian and also to relay a couple of bits of research we might want, someone to do, whether it's Natalie or you all, on examples of, like, what happens elsewhere if you eliminate parking requirements? You okay with what are the asks?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
And Natalie also had a list of alternatives that developers could do, like have a car share program or have bike parking that's enclosed. So when she's back, she can bring those
Okay.
back to the table too.
That'd
All
be
right.
great. I'd really like to hear about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those would be part of our guidance, right? We talked about sticking in the guidance for the planning board.
And some of those were included in Edgewater.
Okay. Everybody good? All right. I appreciate that. That was a good conversation. Second item is proposed amendments to the budget. Chris, you're going to talk us through that?
Sure. We have two proposed amendments to the 2024 adopted budget. Both are within the general fund. Both are for fire. So the first, this is in your packet, the first budget change would be to increase repair of equipment in the fire budget by $19,000, utilizing contingency fund. This is to repair our hydraulic system on our ladder truck for the fire department. So we have a ladder truck and two engines on the front line and one in reserve. This is a critical piece of our infrastructure, and we've been having trouble with the hydraulics and the electronics on it. The second one is we received a grant from Dutchess County for $20,000 through their municipal investment grant fund. We are putting that towards the purchase of 8 thermal imaging cameras, which help to identify where there might be fire or heat in a structure. So our chief was able to find 8 cameras for $26,919. He's going to use some of his equipment budget, but then we're also going to put this $20,000 grant on our books and use it towards that purchase. So if you vote for these next week, this will be our first budget amendment. And I do know that I'll give you an update on the contingency next week when we go to vote, because I know you have asked for that.
Okay. Any questions, comments on those?
Nope.
Who uses the thermal imaging equipment? Is it just anybody that's going into the building is wearing it? Is it the lieutenant, or how does it work exactly?
It's the firefighters.
Mm-hmm.
It can be either.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have enough now that all of the people on staff would have access to one. And radios is next. We're trying to buy new radios, so be coming to you hopefully later this year with another grant.
All right. Next item is discussion of a potential resolution on the Gaza conflict. Paloma, you had asked to put this on the agenda, so I guess I would ask you to introduce this and make the first comments.
Sure. Thank you for allowing this discussion to happen. I think it's something that I've been hearing from many members in the community is wanted, though I understand there's not consensus on that. And in terms of the discussion, what I would suggest is that we actually set aside the text of the resolution itself that was put on the agenda for the moment. I will be the first to admit that it was not a perfect draft, and that I am hoping that maybe we can have a little bit more of a discussion, one, on answering some fundamental questions, and two, focused on some things that I think we may agree on, things that I have heard consistently through emails and conversations with community members. So first, to answer some of those fundamental questions, what I've heard other council members ask me is why Beacon, and what is the actual potential for the city to have impact. One is sort of what is the overall goal of introducing a resolution of like this, the goal of the city weighing in at all on this conversation. And the third question that I've been hearing a lot of is how does the city weighing in this way help or hurt our community? I'll maybe share some thoughts I have in those 3 buckets, but I would also very much want to hear from my fellow council members what you've been hearing from the community and what you think about those 3 questions. I'll say in terms of why Beacon and the potential impact, there, in addition to the human impact, in terms of a sense of safety within our communities, the rise in both anti-Semitic and Islamophobic hate crimes around the country, and from what I hear, tensions here in Beacon. There is also, I see some hard impacts, including upwards of $200,000 of taxpayer dollars specifically within Beacon that have been going to fund this conflict. And missing this data point at the moment, but several 100,000 tons of carbon emissions that have resulted from the ongoing aggressions. I also want to recognize that in terms of what the purpose and power and force of the city weighing in includes the fact that Beacon is a powerful voting bloc for our federally elected officials, and there's a reason that this resolution is addressed to them. It's not addressed to anyone outside of the country. It's addressed to our own government officials, and there's a reason and purpose for that. I also want to recognize that, or really ask the question of why not Beacon? We have stood for human rights and for diversity and in solidarity with our many interconnected communities here in Beacon in the past through our resolution for us to be a safe and welcoming city. Sure. Yeah. Beacon has stood in the past for human rights, for diversity, and in solidarity with our many interconnected communities. And I see this as a continuation of that. I would also say that a goal is to say out loud some of the truths that we do agree on as a step towards trying to build that sense of safety and enable a deeper conversation within our community. I personally don't necessarily see this forum as the best place for deeper and engaged dialogue. I don't know that we are set up to hold that, but I do think that we have a responsibility and an opportunity to say a few things that I have heard that we agree on. And I will also say for my part, I have been engaging with other community leaders within Beacon from both the Jewish and Islamic and Christian communities who I think are better set up to facilitate a deeper dialogue. And I will continue to support trying to see that through. I have more to say, but I've spoken a lot here, and I'd really love to hear what other council members think.
I'm willing to go first. I appreciate you bringing this to the table. I'm very respectful of the views that you express. I open with, I abhor the attacks of October 7th. I abhor the continuing loss of life that's occurring in the response. I think a lot of you know my family hails from that part of the world and is from an island that's still occupied, despite as many resolutions as there have been. However, you know, I fail to see any connection to the city of Beacon of this resolution at all. I can't figure out what the nexus is. You mentioned kind of safe and welcome. That's a reference to what a lot of people call the Sanctuary City resolution. And it wasn't called Sanctuary City, it was called Safe and Welcoming. I wrote that resolution, I wrote that, all right? I know exactly what it's about. And I was very careful in writing it because sanctuary was a false term. The city was not able to offer sanctuary to illegal immigrants, which is what that was about. What we were able to do and make a direct connection to the city is we were able to say that no city employee would assist federal officials in doing their job absent a court order. That's a very direct connection. It was an instruction to employees of the city in terms of what they should and shouldn't do. And specifically, if an ICE official was saying, help me find this person, the answer back needed to be, get a court order. As soon as you have a court order, I'll do whatever you ask, right? Because we never ask our employees to do something that's not legal. That was the essence of the resolution, right? And so it had an absolute direct connection to what we do. I don't see one here. And to use the word safe and welcoming, I don't think we're making all of our residents safe this way. I don't think we're making all of our residents welcome this way. And so I would say this is not an appropriate topic for the city. There are other topics that were appropriate. We might want to have dialogue, but to put the perimeter of the city is saying a great deal about what the city is. I may do exactly this. I've already spoken to my congressman about the Middle East, and I'm happy to do that as an individual. I'm reluctant to do it as a council.
Lee, can you share more about your thoughts on dialogue that you mentioned? I'm curious if you see any role for the city in helping to foster that or support it?
I think there's been lots of conversation, which I think has been really good. It's been very emotional. I've had plenty of tears over the weekend for those who saw some of those conversations. And there may be a role. I think, Jeff, you also had kind of discussed maybe there's a convening role, which certainly is part of being a community and keeping our community together and having a conversation where people can talk to one another. I see that as being valuable. I mean, Jeff, you had some thoughts on that as well, or am I jumping the gun?
No, we did discuss that. It's a bit of perhaps a hammer and nail situation, since this is one of the reasons I joined the council, was really wanting to encourage more dialogue within our city, and recognizing that there are perceived divisions and real divisions. But as a student of communications and psychology, I just know that there's things that can be done effectively. It's not an easy lift, but again, hammer and nail could accuse me of that, but I see this as an opportunity for there to be dialogue within our borders to talk about really what the intent would be of a resolution, to talk about it and what we're trying to achieve, and see if we can circle around, back out of, identify the gaps and the opportunities to get towards those things that would enhance the aspects of the community that we're trying to achieve.
Others?
Yeah, I just, I'm very sympathetic to the idea of a resolution, and so much of the content is something that I'm very emotional about a lot lately. Pretty much every day, if you're scrolling through social media, you've accidentally stumbled upon something that will give you nightmares that night. And I, as a dad with 2 kids, I have seen videos of kids the age of my own children in situations that no child should ever be in. And I'm very sensitive to the harm to children. But when I have really strong feelings like that, I always want to take action. I always want to do something, And it didn't occur to me that a resolution would be a thing to do when I was, it just didn't. It doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't have any direct impact, and it feels so small in the grand scheme of things. And I'm very interested in doing something, but I don't think that a resolution is the answer. And one of the reasons for that is if we're going to craft a resolution, it's going to be, aside from it being 4 out of 7 members at a table who of a city of 15,000 people, but for us to get this resolution right, we're going to have to engage in a foreign policy conversation that could last for a very long time to get it right. If we want to get this resolution to the way that we think that we can get 4 votes, we're going to need foreign policy advisors. It's going to suck all the air out of the room. And this is a conversation that is and should be happening at hundreds of thousands of rooms around the world. But this is the only room where we can talk about the business of the city of Beacon. This is the only room where we can talk about zoning. This is the only room where we can talk about improving our quality of life. And I'm very concerned about what this resolution would do. I have thoughts about other things that we can do, the council, the public, everybody. I think there's a lot of things that we can do. I signed on to a letter that was circulated by Local Progress calling for a ceasefire. I believe in a ceasefire. I'm opposed to any act that is killing humans. It's really that simple. I want to do something, but I think the resolution will actually do more harm than good to the other work that we have to do. I would support a resolution on a ceasefire. It's a no-brainer. Who wants to kill? Who wants more killing? Who wants more of these videos of children in shock and stuff, you know? But a resolution, it's not going to make a difference. It's going to make us maybe feel good for a little while, but it's not going to make a difference. And I want to do something that makes a difference. And I'm really open to suggestions about that, and I'd be glad to share the local progress letter with everyone if you want to sign on. Over 300 local electeds signed this letter, which I think is a lot more impactful. It says here that there's 48 city council resolutions, and I'm guessing 300 to 350 independent local elected officials is probably on par with that number as well. That's how I feel. And it's really hard to say that you really care about something, but I'm not going to do something about it. I just think it's the wrong thing.
Dan, I really appreciate your thoughts, and they were very well spoken. I don't know that there's much I can add to that, but I had heard from the public that they want to hear from council, so I will weigh in as well. I'm going to say I hope that diplomacy can be enacted to bring about a ceasefire where hostages are released, humanitarian aid flows freely, and the warring power structures come to an agreement that allows all people in the region to move forward safely and with an ability to fully experience their human rights. I don't think that what's happening in that region is positive in any way. I don't think anybody does. I am really fervently hopeful that the negotiations that are beginning at the State Department level are able to make significant progress before there is further attacks on Rafah, and that any refugees or migrants of any conflict should find a safe home, I would say here. There's also generational and very real-time trauma involved for so many people, and very strong emotions on all sides. I am not going to say a word about the draft resolution at this point in time, but just on the basis of should the council adopt a resolution, my thinking is very much in line with yours, Dan, and I don't see this as an action that brings peace or safety or a sense of welcoming to our entire community. I already see how divisive and how much pain it has inflicted on so many people. And so I respectfully also kind of reiterate what Paloma said, in that I think there is a very important need for dialogue, for coming together, for an action that makes sense and has the ability to impact change. But I don't think that this room is necessarily the place where that happens. I am very supportive of some of the offers that have been made by multiple community members to engage in, bringing people together in whatever that looks like. I'm supportive of that, and I'm also willing to step back from that in whatever the capacity needs.
Well, I can't top anything of what everybody said. I was elected to represent City of Beacon, and even when I was on the city council previously, I really did not want to get involved sitting in this seat in international global affairs. And I know before this issue came up, I was very strong about that in my thinking, but listening to everybody, people are hurting. And I feel this week we do not have peace in this community. I do not feel we have unity. And it's disturbing and scary. And our hearts are all broken for so many lives that have been lost, not just in Gaza, not just in Israel, in this world. Sitting in this seat, I know I cannot solve it, and I do not have enough knowledge to even take the time away from City of Beacon, work to be done, to even consider, saying yes to a resolution. But I really think our community does need something. We need to have dialogue, and we do need to find out how we together can have peace with one another. And I can't answer that question, but I would like to be able to help in any way I can.
I will just add that I am devastated by what happened on October 7th and equally devastated by Israel's response to that. And I, like others, didn't feel that my role, and still don't feel that my role, is to wade into international politics, but I am very honored by all the people who reached out to us as community leaders. I actually didn't think of myself as one until this moment, which is my own journey, but I think the people who are looking to us at this time to help, and actually for all the people, I think almost every single person who reached out and said, I do not agree with this resolution, and took the time to say why, they almost all said they believed in a ceasefire. And as do I, and I looked at and signed the letter for local progress that Dan said today, because I think it is something that so many people in our country believe in. So I am looking to see if there is a role the city can play in fostering dialogue, and if the result of that dialogue is that there are people in our community who believe there is a version of a resolution, maybe something similar, maybe nothing similar to what was shared in the packet today, then I am all for signing that. As Dan said, if there is something that our community collectively comes to our city and says, yes, it's not international politics, but this will help us to heal here in Beacon, then I am for that. So I'll just pass it back to you, Lee.
I'd like to say something else as well. I mentioned that there were a few items that I consistently heard throughout the community, and I just heard again at this table. One is that nearly nobody who has reached out has said that they're against a ceasefire. And I think that it's worth the city saying that, not just at this table, but in an official capacity. If that is the only thing that the resolution says, I still think that that is worth saying. I also heard consistently a desire for a return of all hostages and political prisoners to safety and their families. I also heard a consistent recognition of the inhumanity, both in the attacks on October 7th and also in the loss of 300,000 Palestinian lives. I've heard nobody say anything other than that both of those facts are an atrocity against humanity and not in line with our values. I've also consistently heard a recognition, whether you agree or not, on the impact of the tens of billions of dollars in US tax money that has gone to the Israeli military with little to no accountability. And I've also consistently heard the desire for humanitarian aid to, as Amber said, flow freely into Gaza and address the impacts of this ongoing conflict. I would continue to ask my fellow council members, regardless of other pieces of this puzzle that may require a degree in international diplomacy, to discuss, to at least agree in one voice on these few facts that, again, I have heard consistently, not just at this table, but in the community. If that list needs to be shorter, we can make it shorter. I really am uncomfortable abdicating responsibility to not speak from this platform. I'm have humility on the impact that what the city of Beacon has to say affects foreign dignitaries. But I do fundamentally believe in democracy and direct democracy, and that we have a role and responsibility to primarily tend to the day-to-day operations of the city, but also to tend to the people of the city. And I don't think that there is a clear line between our discussions of parking minimums and our discussions of our shared humanity in the city. And I will continue to ask that we say that.
Thank you. I just want to add, I mean, this is a hard area. I sit in this seat because I was elected by the voters of Beacon, and I try to represent the city, and I try to represent its residents. I'll just, I'm trying to look for ways that we can bring our community together and not divide us. I have an anecdote, which was Friday was the opening day for a new store in Beacon. It's Nilifer's Kitchen, and it's just a few doors down. And, I know who they are. Nilifer happens to be Turkish American. She's from mainland Turkey. Speaks with an accent. Her first customer was me, the Greek Cypriot American, who happens to be mayor. Right? All right, let's give the room a minute.
Cowards. You're all cowards. What you're talking about right now, all the ceasefire.
Stand for justice. Represent us.
So I think we're looking for ways that we can build community and not tear our community apart. This doesn't seem to be the issue. My 2 cents was if I've got a new business, Turkish American especially, I should be there, right? And I'm willing to do things in this venue that brings the community together and not things that tear us apart. And if we can convene a meeting for people to meet and discuss. That's exactly. So that's exactly. I know it's really hard, and I don't think there's no resolution that will make everyone in the community happy. And as a result, we've made a number of people unhappy. I don't think that we don't feel their pain, don't see the same suffering that they see, maybe not to the same degree. But again, I think our focus needs to be on our community and on preserving our community. That's all I would add. Anyone else on this one?
I just want to say one other thing. Is when I'm talking about taking other action, obviously a community dialogue is important, but I think there's a lot of people who might not be ready for community dialogue. I think there's people who are in a lot of pain, and reaching out to people who are in pain to tell them that you want to talk to them is not meeting them where they are. Yeah. But I obviously support dialogue, and I obviously advocate for it, and I've met with the rabbi, and we've discussed what some of the possibilities are. I'm interested in actually direct action. I am actually interested in working with the community on finding a way to stop killing. There's no reason for any human to die at the hand of another human. There's no valid reason whatsoever. And it's happening now because Hamas and Benjamin Netanyahu are trying to protect power and exacerbate differences, and it's, I don't know. Like, I belong to an organization also that is advocating to create a world parliament. I think that the idea of replacing international law with world law and having world parliament is long overdue. And I think that there's real solutions because, I want to see a ceasefire, of course. I can't stand the idea of another child being killed. But what's happened in the last several months has baked in several more generations of war. Those little children that are in shock, when they get out of shock, they will remember who killed their family, and they will remember their entire lives, which means that we have baked in several generations more of this, and we need an actual long-term solution. And I'm interested in talking to everybody about what that is and how to achieve it.
Agree.
Are we okay to go forward? On to the next item?
I think I'd like to name one more thing, which is that I don't see this conversation as causing division. I see this conversation as bringing to light division and disagreement that already exists, and I think that to talk about it truthfully is a necessary, and honestly is a necessary step towards healing. And while, again, I don't necessarily see this particular venue as the most healing space, I don't think that it means that it's a wrong space to, again, say some truths and say some things out loud, as long as it's in tandem with continuing to build more personal community connections. It's a both and for me.
I'll follow on to what you're talking about, Paloma, in our conversation, and just to express that this is an evolving situation, and our minds, our decisions are evolving. My first instinct, as I said, it's what I know, it's what I believe. I do believe that dialogue is necessary for many things, and you've heard me say it before, and I think we have an incredible mental health crisis, and this is not helping. It's another reason we need to be very frank and honest in our conversations about the impacts on our community of many things. But I'm very open to the way to go about this. My thoughts before speaking to you, Paloma, were, we need dialogue before we could even devise what a resolution would look like. But you talked to me about, well, maybe a resolution is a foundation for that conversation. I don't know that that's the answer, but I'm open to it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you all. I appreciate those who are still there in the audience and those who were there and left, and it's all right. Next item is the city administrator update on capital projects. I guess let's give everybody a minute. Okay, why don't we start up again?
All right. So we have a discussion later in the meeting about council priorities, and Molly had asked if I could put together a brief update on the capital projects that we're doing, because those necessarily pull a lot of bandwidth of the city. I'm going to go through a slide deck, and Ben is going to advance slides for me. Just as context for people that are just tuning in and members of the council who are new, we do a 5-year capital program, which is a plan of how to spend.
Sorry to interrupt, Chris. I just wanted to do first. I feel like I just need a few minutes of. I mean, I don't know. It feels a little callous to move on so quickly from that. I think I just need a few moments before we proceed with business, if that's okay.
I'm feeling it too, Jeff.
I know. No, I know. I'm sure
usually
we are.
really happy about firehouses and stuff.
You want to take a couple minutes?
I would.
All right,
Yeah.
so let's just do silence. If you need to get up, great. We won't be too long. Thank you all. So we've got a couple of options. One is we can get through the rest of this. The topics are a city administrator update on capital projects, city council priorities for the year, and a bus service update. I don't think those are long nor terribly controversial topics. We can go through those and go home. I think the other option is we can adjourn now and pick it up next time. I don't think any of those are extremely time sensitive. It's sort of up to you.
My perspective is to carry on with the city of the business of the city that we are here to do, regardless of our emotions.
I agree with Amber.
Everybody all right? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And if you're okay, Chris, can you take us through the update on the capital projects?
Yes. Ben, are we back live?
Yes, you're live.
Okay. You're going to be talking about the council's priorities, and Molly had asked me to put together an overview of our current capital projects. I had produced a list and sent it around to, I think, all of you, that basically shows that we are either undertaking right now or about to start $42.6 million in capital projects. We're doing more projects in last year and this year than in the last 5 years combined. And I wanted to run through and give you an update where we are on those. Some of these may be new to you. Some of them you've probably been hearing about for a long time. So Ben, and this is a rendering of the front of the fire department, and I'll talk more about that when I get to that particular slide, but you can see this is what it's going to look like from Walcott Avenue. We turned the building around from facing South Avenue to facing Walcott, and I'll talk more about that project shortly. Ben, please advance. Oh, I guess I have to advance mine here. As I was mentioning, we just the projects that we're doing right now this year and maybe early next year exceed about $42.6 million. They are building projects, water, wastewater, sidewalks, and even a renewable energy installation. So I'm excited to talk about this. Some of you are aware that we did 2 sidewalk replacements on South Avenue last year. That's what the photo is, and we're going to try to continue building on those sidewalk projects in that same neighborhood. Ben, can you advance, please? This is also in the packet, too. There we go. This is one that goes back 2 years. It's in our wastewater treatment plan, and we have 3 tanks of 2 chambers each, which are called our primary settling tanks. They had basically not been upgraded for a period of almost 40 years, and we undertook a bid and awarded that bid in 2022 for $1.9 million. We did receive ARPA funding, which some of you know as the American Rescue Plan Act. That was money that was done to help recover from the coronavirus back in March of 2021. Some of the cities around us got $20 million, like Poughkeepsie got almost $21 million, Kingston got almost 19, Middletown 21 million. We were a non-entitlement community that because we've fallen below a certain level of poverty, we only got 1.43 million. So when I've had to explain to some of our employees, why aren't we doing what Kingston did? Well, we only got a small fraction of what they got. And what we did is we put it towards hard infrastructure, which was both, we were trying to figure out what is the thing that will be meaningful for everyone, and making sure our wastewater is treated was that. So we started this project in April 2022. We had supply chain issues where we couldn't get metal components for this. We are now 2/3 of the way done, and once the weather breaks, we'll be finishing the last third of the project and closing that out. Ben, can you go ahead, please? Some of you, I think we gave an update in December about the water meter project. Each of the 4,500 or so households in Beacon has a water meter, and we read that water meter and then we bill for the water usage, and that money goes into paying for both the operations and the capital costs. We had lined up a project that's about $1.56 million to replace all of the MXU units on those. And we will be starting that either later this month or in early March, starting in the first ward, and we will let you know when letters are about to go out, and we'll also be doing outreach on our website and social media. Basically, what this allows us to do is read the meters remotely from locations where there are receiving units that get the data. It also helps people, people can then also sign into a portal where they can see their water usage, and we can also track it in real time. So if somebody all of a sudden uses 10,000 gallons of water a day, we can actually trigger that to set off an alarm with us, so we can say, hey, we think you have a pipe that's broken in the basement. And this has happened more than once, where people have had pipes break or people have had leaks, and then they get bills that are in the thousands of dollars. And this will help to address that and also make it so that we don't have to drive around the city reading meters, you know, at the source. So we hope that that project's about an 18-month implementation, so we're hoping to be done by the end of next year. It really is going to depend again on supply chain issues. We are competing with other communities for a limited number of these MXU units. We do have enough to do a quarter of the city, and we're building inventory for the next quarter. Ben, next slide, please. So we have been moving towards 100% renewable energy for all city operations. Right now, 70% of our energy comes from the solar farm on Dennings Avenue on the old landfill. We have a small array on top of this building, and then we cover all of the rest of the electricity that we buy through the purchase of renewable energy credits and or community solar. We are looking to continue to move forward our local generation, and we have spec'd out the possible installation of a 170 kilowatt system on the highway garage over at Camp Beacon Road off of Matawan. Our engineer right now is evaluating that to make sure that the load rating of the roof is sufficient. We did get a grant from Assembly Member Jacobson in the amount of $125,000. The cost of the unit would be $400,000, and then we are likely to get 30% back from federal tax credits that, for the first time, are not just tax credits, but they're grants to municipalities. So more than half of the cost of this could be offset. We're doing further evaluations and hope to come back to you by summer with a bid if this is successful. And this would add another 4 to 5% of our operational electricity as being covered by locally generated solar. Ben? The firehouse has been right in front of us, very prominent location. We are about 55 to 60% done with the project now. For those that are just tuning in, this is a project that took a building that was built in the early 1980s. It was functionally obsolete at this point for modern firefighting purposes. We are doing a gut renovation of the 10,000 square foot building and an addition of 6,400 square feet. It will go from having had 3 bays to 5 bays. So we will be able to co-locate the ambulance that we now contract with. You'll see tenting around the building right now. It's an all brick facade, real brick, and that brickwork is starting on the south side already, and in the next few months you're going to see the facade open up. We're going over to do an inspection on Thursday. Many of the walls are actually being closed up inside, so it's moving quickly, and when it gets to a certain point, we will offer a tour to the City Council. When we open, we will proudly offer tours to the community, so you can see what we've done inside there. But the project's going really well. We have great contractors, and we do expect to be done somewhere around September of this year.
And I would I don't know, Pam, you may have also been part of the what do we do about the fire department deliberations, but having been part of that, seeing this and the pace at which this is being completed is phenomenal. I don't know that many construction projects of this scale would be finished in 15 months or so. So
Yeah. We've been lucky so far, so don't.
Yeah, knock on wood. I didn't say anything.
And I would also just say that This will give us operational improvements, such as having a decontamination area so that firefighters, when they come back with carcinogenic smoke on their clothing, they can get out of that, they can clean their gear, they can clean themselves. It's going to be an ADA compliant, energy efficient building, geothermal heated and cooled. The building that we took apart didn't have a shred of insulation in it. So this will be one of the greenest firehouses as well. And we had them design it so it looked like a stately, beautiful public building. And we hope that is what comes about. So far, so good.
Chris,
Ben?
can I ask a small question about that? I want to echo Amber's kudos. The way that you've been managing this massive project with all of our contractors is really very impressive.
Thanks.
And one relatively small piece of the puzzle I wanted to ask about is that I know there was a conversation with our current firefighters about how best to display and honor the history of the department and all of the sort of memorabilia that have collected over multiple firehouses. You don't have to give an update on that now, but just something I wanted to bring up while we're talking.
Okay, so 2 points. One is, I'm not responsible for this going so well. I would credit the Palumbo Group, which is our construction management firm, and they are just an absolute pleasure to work with. And they just, they're there every day doing this. On the honoring the history, we do have a significant set aside in the foyer going in where you see the stairs on this. And that we have display cases. I have both the current chief, Chief Lucchese, and our former chief, Van Voris, working with the 3 volunteer companies to see what they would want to put in there as we get closer. It doesn't all have to be done the day we open either. What I thought is, once this is open, then you can start to better envision the spaces and what fits in those spaces. We have lots of walls where memorabilia can hang, and I think we will maximize. We have invited them to, maximize the history that goes back into the building. And the memorials on the outside will be reinstalled. In fact, our DPW took them for safekeeping and put them over at the DM, at the highway garage so that they wouldn't be damaged.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this has just been a great project, and again, I don't know how we would have done this absent the new sales tax agreement that Lee did with the county, what is it, a year and a half ago now. Ben, can we keep going? This one is our longest project. This project started before some of my staff were born.
Chris, why are you trying to age me like this?
I'm not really ever. But I'll tell you, this project is aging me. So when I came on
Let me date myself. I think I predate that project.
Yes,
on the council.
You do,
Yeah.
as do I the first time around.
Yeah.
This project was started in 2001. And I didn't say that incorrectly. It started in 2001. And when I got here 3 years ago, we were about to lose many millions of dollars in federal and state funded. This is what's called a federal aid, locally administered project. In this case, it is 80% federal, 15% state, and 5% local, even though the 5% local we can use some of the CHIPS money that we get. It's like CHIPS money, but it's called state touring routes. It is for the complete rehabilitation of all of Teller Avenue, and originally it was going to be all of Fishkill Avenue. And some of you remember we did plans for this. I worked with our former highway superintendent, Zepp, to try to get all the 36 little pieces of property that we needed to buy because we didn't have sufficient width to put sidewalks. The sidewalks were part on our property, part on somebody else's, and if you're doing a DOT project, you have to have clear ownership or an easement. So over 2 years, we bought 36 little pieces of property. We will be putting this out to bid, hopefully, in 2 weeks. We put it out to bid last year with the whole thing, and it came in at over $13.5 million, which was $6 million over budget. I did go back and get additional money from DOT prior to that because it had escalated in price, but there was no way we could touch that price. So we rejected all of the bids, and what we've done is we've had them revise this to do all of Teller, and again, keep the scope the same. All new sidewalks, new storm drainage, some of the underground utilities will be replaced, all new road surfacing, new intersections, ADA curb ramps, upgrades to the Teller-Fishkill Avenue lights, pedestrian tables on Fishkill Avenue near the park. There's 2 pedestrian speed tables that will hopefully slow traffic down. We're also looking at putting, at the same time, one on Wilkes Street where we've had kind of chronic speeding issues. We did have to truncate. We had to make 2 changes to make this affordable. One is we took out the granite curbs, which were very, very expensive, and we're going just with monolithic concrete curbs, which are simply as functional, they're just not quite as pretty. Secondly, we truncated the project at Blackburn Avenue. I do have them putting an extra sidewalk going all the way to and beyond Hedgewood as an add-alt. That means if we have enough money and the whole base bid comes in low enough, we can add that back. If we don't add it back, we will be doing that probably in 2025. I'll be talking about another sewer project that we're doing to the east of where we're leaving off, and that's in anticipation that I am trying by the end of 2025 to have this whole roadway done. If it's not all done in this project, it will be done in other projects. So I think we have a route to be able to do that even with having truncated this federal aid project. And I'm really hopeful that we begin the construction in May.
Chris,
I don't know the size of the pipes, Molly. I know you're burning to ask me that, but.
Well, then forget it. Am I understanding correctly that we already have the plans for what we want to do, everything you described, kind of the tables and the sidewalks laid out?
We have detailed plans that have gone through many years of review by, like when you do a federal aid project, you have to have a draft design report, a final design report, your PS&E, which is your plan specification and engineer's estimate.
Yeah.
We've done iterations of that, and we're just waiting for the final go to bid at this point.
My request then with that is that maybe closer to when the work might begin is to maybe use some council time to present to us and the public what those plans are again, and then kind of maybe correspondingly what they can expect with some road closures or delays kind of related to the construction. I think that'd be really helpful.
Yes. I will do my best. I inherited this engineering firm, and I will just say that I inherited this engineering firm.
Okay. Great.
And again, sometimes you just got to stay on the same horse because you're not going to get where you need to go. And I may not be able to get them here, but we can certainly give you updates on the traffic stuff. Maybe I'll do my best to explain this and bring our engineer in who's a little more communicative.
I put out the ask, and I rely and trust on you to bring back what you are able and feel is best to meet those needs. So.
But we're going to do this year. Ben, next project?
Sorry, I have one sort of technical question in there. It was pointed out to me recently that since this project started in 2001, the city adopted our complete streets policy after the project started. I know you just explained that there are many, many layers of design review that already happen. Do you know if any of those design review phases included a complete street analysis?
I don't know if you would call it a complete street analysis, but when NISDOT looked at it, we had to think about ADA compliance. So persons with disabilities, all of the curb ramps have to be ADA compliant, both for people with in wheelchairs and also people who are blind. So you have the detection strips. They basically, we didn't have the road width to do any kind of separated bike lane, but there are what's called curb offsets. It's like a shoulder. So just having a fully paved, stable shoulder is actually a huge improvement for for that. And then all of the sidewalk that exists is going to be upgraded to 5-foot wide ADA compliant sidewalks. So this is about as complete a street as you get with the available real estate that you have. And I want to remind you, like we had to literally buy long pieces of 2-foot wide by 100, which went on and on for years, and just to be able to build the sidewalks. So at some point, we can go back and we can think about restriping the road, but everything from crosswalks to the curb ramps to the sidewalks advance this. And when I talk about the bus stuff too, our bus transit along that route will be improving as of June 1st as well. So we are trying to look at this corridor holistically while you're looking at the planning aspects of it.
Thank you for that.
Ben, let's keep going here. What's next? So our water supply comes from 3 dams, Mount Beacon, Cargill, and Melzinga, and then 3 wells. We have well 1 and 2 in the town of Fishkill, and then we buy water from well 8 in the village of Fishkill. Those 6 sources create a safe yield of water that we use. You may remember we just rehabilitated the Mount Beacon and Pocket Dam. Now the Pocket Dam is just a small holding dam below Mount Beacon. The next one to go is the Melzinga Dam, which is located in the town of Fishkill off of Route 9D. This is about a $3 million project. It raises the dam 4 feet. And the reason we're raising the dams is because with the changing climate, we are getting storms that no one would have predicted years ago. And that volume of water, if it overtops a dam, it can actually wipe out a dam. So you're saying, basically by raising the dam, you're increasing the spillway capacity to control the flow of the water out of it. We would also be replacing all of the piping in this, the valves that shut it off, and shoring up the structure of the dam. Cargill right now is in pretty good shape. This one is the next one we need to do. We have fully done the plans, and they've been submitted to the jurisdictional agency, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. We're hoping to go with this year, but we just don't know how long the review process will be. And I don't like to go out to bid in the summer because then everybody's already gotten their projects for the year. So if I don't have this approval in hand and ready to go to bid by, say, April, I probably will suspend it to next year. And again, this is funded out of the water fund, not the general fund.
And you said the plans are fully developed for this?
Yes.
Was there I think I heard someone say that there was consideration about turbines in pipe turbine generation for the water system?
The engineers didn't think it was enough to warrant putting the infrastructure up to the dam, Jeff. You did remind me, we are doing energy dissipators below to slow the water coming off the dam. So there are going to be essentially large boulders and concrete structures to slow that down. But that had been asked about the Mount Beacon Dam. This is our smallest dam, so this is 58 million gallons, and there's really not the flow to warrant that. We looked at Mount Beacon, which is 125 million gallons, and again, they didn't think it was worth it. And then Cargill's the largest at about 160 million gallons.
Closer to infrastructure, though, those pressure diverters in pipe, not natural features,
Yeah.
like boulders, but those pressure diverters are kind of a win-win scenario opportunity. And so I'd be keen to have conversation about where that might be a win-win infrastructural upgrade where we actually can generate electricity.
Yeah, I think the main issue is how that new electricity interfaces with the grid.
Correct.
This is a pretty, both Cargill, all 3 of them are in pretty remote locations. And I don't want to hold up a dam project by putting in, these are complex
that makes
enough to
sense.
get
I mean,
approved.
the Sarai solar fields don't always make sense. It's because the interconnect is too far
Yeah.
away from the main, the 3-phase lines that it needs to be. But there are
Right.
places potentially in our system where this could be an advantage, where we're doing these infrastructure upgrades.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would, again, if we were going to look at something like hydro, you'd probably want something with more flow. This gets really dry in the spring. We use this first in the year, and then we take it offline because it dries up. Not this year, everything's overflowing this year. Ben, next slide, please. This one's, I didn't even expect we'd be doing this 2 years ago. Back at our wastewater treatment plant where we're doing the pretty tanks, the mechanism that separates solids from water in what comes into the system is called a belt press, and that's kind of an awkward picture on the left of what we actually have. We have been patching this thing back together. It is at the end of its useful life. It has gone down for weeks at a time, in which we've actually had to send sludge out to other communities to process. We are proposing a $5 million project to replace the belt press with what you see on the right, which is 2 centrifuges. These are like salad spinners that separate the water and the solids more efficiently than the belt press. Long term, they will lower the truck traffic going out of our plant to currently landfills. All of that solid matter goes to a landfill, and our goal was to try to reduce the volume of that, and taking the water out actually reduces the weight and the volume of it. So we are waiting for DEC approval again on, they have to oversee everything we do in terms of drinking water and wastewater. And we hope to have this out to bid this spring, because we have been patching this thing back together. We've got great staff down there who have been putting this back together with bubble gum and duct tape, and that can only last so long. So we need to invest in this plant for the next 40 years, and those are capital-intensive investments. Questions?
I really appreciated Dave's very thorough reporting on this when we were approving this on the budget last year. One thing that he brought up, or maybe you brought up, is that this new system is going to open potential use for the solids in the future, that you might end up with a more refined dry solid that can be used for fertilizer or other uses. Is that still the idea?
That's not the primary idea. I'm trying to reduce the volume of solids that we send out. Whether or not we can meet the standards for land application or haven't been fully vetted. Like we don't have a lot of industrial waste going in, but there's a lot of stuff that goes in that would remain in that. And Northern Europe tried land application of what they call biosolids years ago, and they ended up concentrating heavy metals in their agricultural soils. So there are a lot of trade-offs here.
Yeah.
There's cost, there's long-term environmental sustainability. There's no great answers right now for disposal of this. The other thing we are going to do is we're upgrading the energy efficiency of the building as we do this. We'll be putting in a new roof, which has insulation. We'll be doing all the lighting and the fans. So as we do our projects, you know, every time we can move the ball forward on energy efficiency and conservation, we do that. Ben? Okay, this one is going out to bid on Thursday if things work out. We've been talking about this for at least 3 or 4 capital cycles. It's the replacement of the old West Main pump station and force main. It's part of our sanitary sewer system. A pump station basically is a small building with pumps in it that can help you push your sewage up a hill, up a slope to the treatment plant. Most of our system here is based on gravity, and it flows downhill. We do have 3 or 4 pump stations. This one was the oldest and has been breaking down. And then the forced main is the pipe that comes out of the pump station and heads across parking lots by Metro North into our interceptor that goes into the wastewater treatment plant. So we will be completely rebuilding this building. We're building a building towards the track side, so we've had to negotiate easements and permits with Metro North, and then we will be replacing this and decommissioning the old building. And this is, again, an important, pipes in the ground aren't always visible, but when they're failing, they become visible, and ways that we don't want them to become visible. Any questions?
I mean, I assume with the Edgewater project too, the new pump station will be beneficial.
Yes, it's vital to that. Yeah. Okay, and then I think the next one's sewer too, Ben?
We got the big ones done, or you're going to go through them all?
No, I got two more here,
Okay,
Lee.
cool.
I'm excited about this stuff, you know?
On most
Spending your money.
I think on most other nights, we would be too.
I know.
You can blame me, Lee. I was like, yeah, Chris, talk about all the stuff.
All right, so this is what I talked about. We're going to be replacing the sanitary sewer east of where we're truncating that federal DOT project. I also may be coming back to you with the replacement of a water main when we introduce our capital program on May 20th. And I won't say any more. It's just pipes in the ground so that we can then fix the road and not have to dig them up in 2 years. And Ben, I think we're done here, right?
We have 2 park updates.
Oh, these are great. We got 2 good ones. South Avenue Park, this is a long time coming. We are going to, this fall, replace the surface on the tennis court and the basketball court, fix the walkways, narrow the overly large paved parking lot so we can plant trees, and we're going to replace the really inefficient lights with LED lights. Mark is working on the design. We'll be bringing you back a conceptual design within 1 to 2 months.
And that
then-
includes bathrooms as well?
Oh, yeah, and a bathroom, absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the principal things, and thanks, it's getting late.
I just think a few of us know that Air Roads was the first person who asked for the bathrooms at, down here, so I think
Should we make them?
Should we name it after Air?
when it's done, well, yeah, that's right, and then I'll write to her and let her know. Yeah,
I think you better ask Eric.
I think they'd be honored by that.
totally.
Who wouldn't be? And we did get a $150,000 grant towards this $450,000 project. Again, thank you to Assembly Member Jacobson, who likes fire trucks and parks. And the final, Ben, drum roll. We're closing the We Play. I think it closed today or yesterday, and we are going to be replacing all of the play equipment except for one thing that gets reused, all of the fencing, all of the rubberized surface, and cleaning it up. We hope that will be done and the park can reopen by April or early May. And I want to thank the We Play community group for putting in a $31,000 grant towards that. So when they do their sale over at the settlement camp, that money is raised, and they have been donating it back and helping us to improve these areas. So, and I think that's it, Ben, right? Yeah, there's the back of the firehouse. Even that looks pretty, doesn't it? We got rid of the dumpster.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is the trick is doing it without raising taxes, and we've kind of gotten pretty close. So a lot of it is grant money, just not frittering it away. You'd be surprised at, as communities who lose grant money because they started 20 years ago and they never got around to it, right? So that's piece of it. Piece of it is having a good assembly member who brings money to us, and we're, appreciative of that. Sales tax, as Chris mentioned, a big piece. We're bonding a big piece, but the pieces that involves water and sewer are bonded separately. They do add to our total bonding, but they're paid for through the user fees, right? So it's a mixed piece of the puzzle, but I think we've got that too.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris. Well, I think one of the main reasons to present that is just to kind of catch up some of our members who are either new or haven't been here for a while necessarily, and also the public, just to kind of start us off in our new year with our new sitting council. And kind of the next piece of that is to talk about our council priorities. And so it's good to kind of frame that within the total work that we're doing. So we started looking at priorities actually last year, at least in our, recently is when we did it, and we kind of went through and picked up our top issues. Our top issues, we had affordable housing, which we didn't get maybe as far as we want. Maybe that's why it's on there again this year, but that did kind of morph into the Fishkill Avenue Committee. We had a presentation, did a whole report about looking at our rec department and our programs related to that. It also involved revamping our rec committee, so that was a priority. priority, inclusionary zoning that falls within affordable housing, 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, which we didn't end up making progress, but it's also because the state wasn't clear what the things are. We might bring that up again today. And then also the Police Advisory Committee, we did end up having a presentation last spring, and we hope to have actually one of the recommendations from that presentation presented to us, if not this month, then next month. So just to talk about what this is for the council and for the public who might be watching or listening in. So the list here you see is kind of a combination of things that are held over from previous years, things that people have mentioned to me. And I just kind of want to bring that back to do it. As Lee likes to say, it's all about priorities. And so the hope here, part of this process, is A, to name all the things that are potentially on our list that at least one or two members are interested in, and then figure out what are the things we really want to focus on. And so we're going to use today just to kind of go through, see if as a workshop, if we have any additions, any questions, anyone want to frame anything up, and then I'll ask for council's feedback. And what you're going to do is we'll talk a little bit more about this, how this will work, and then at the next available workshop, which might be 2 weeks from today and may not, depending on schedule, we'll kind of bring back what our top issues are.
Okay.
Yep, so I will open it up then for anyone who wants to ask questions or provide context or have additions to this.
I think if I may just kind of hop in with a couple of things that came up, I guess from the public over the past couple of days after this was published. So, and Paloma, you mentioned it, the complete streets. Especially as it, I think, applies to the Fishkill corridor, where we're going to be looking at that a little bit more extensively. So I would just kind of add, making that a part of that discussion and others where relevant. And then there were a couple of ads that I think we all got this afternoon. Thank you, Michal. I see you, so appreciate your feedback. There's some, I guess the search capabilities for agendas are not working, and there's limited access to past council meetings. So I think those are two areas that we can bucket under communications.
Great.
The third item in Michal's list, which I think is a little bit of a more difficult nut to crack, but I think is very much worth conversation, is making our city council meeting notes more robust, more in line with what the planning board has. I know we've brought that up here before, and we don't have consensus about how to accomplish that. But I wonder, with the new council on board, if there are new thoughts at the table on how we can get that done.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot that one. Yeah, I think I just want to think about that a little bit more. I understand the ask, but I also kind of understand adhering to the requirements and not necessarily. Right. I'll say we've had some issues in the past where we have summarized what speakers have said, and then they object to the summarization of their perspective. So I just want to think about it a little bit more in what's a good way to do that, and not, I guess, put words in anyone's mouth who's just a public person speaking.
Yeah, I think I would focus it more on what we're saying and less on the public comment. I think that would be a more productive place to start.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the one thing that we could do is make sure that the prior minutes, which are, every word in full, are always available. Apparently they come off at some point, and maybe there's a way to put it as far back as we need using, whatever server that we could use, because that at least gives you, there is a fundamental record, you can always get to it. Yeah. That might make it a little simpler. Yeah.
Yeah, and one other walk-on item, now that we're talking about this, Spanish translation.
Spanish translation, yeah. I will also say that we don't have to use time right now to get into whether or not we want to do stuff, just as it is. We've been here for 2 hours. Gotcha. I mean, if people have thoughts they want to share, I don't want to cut off that, but that is not, it'll all be added in. If you can, and part of you emailing me your priorities might be like, and also this, and also this. So there will be a document that will be shared and that. So, but Jeff, over to you.
I shared that offline with you, but to add, and Chris, this is a warning that we'll be having a conversation, but about our approach to grant writing.
Yes.
Our approach to what?
Grant writing.
Grant writing.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment about the view sheds piece. So I think there is something that we want to do in 2024. So the view sheds, we established the view shed law, but then we never documented, we identified several view sheds, but we didn't document them, and therefore they are not protected. And I don't know that we did a thorough enough job at that time as well. But also saying that is that if there are view sheds that we want to establish along the Fishkill Avenue corridor, that should probably be in the purview of the, and I think it is if it's not directly, it's implied in the charter of the Fishkill Avenue, the charge of the Fishkill Avenue Committee. So perhaps we could take up the list that doesn't include those.
Yeah, it is in their, it is in their charge.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll also discuss this as a topic that Natalie would have to pick up. So I think,
yeah,
I think we should be working this one.
Great. One thing I'll just give as context for all of you at the table, I mean, when you're looking at is you'll see that affordable housing is a whole big long list of like everything. And I did that specifically because we haven't really talked as a council about which of those things we want to focus on. So I thought better to start with a big bucket, and then if enough of us prioritize it, which my guess is we will, but that is just a guess, that might be something we take up this spring, that we want to actually get into which of these items do we think is worth our time to focus on.
And a question about kind of prioritization, and maybe this is where the weighted prioritization comes in. There's also this concept of weighted shortest job first, where if something is very easy, just do it. Mm-hmm. If it's not going to take a significant amount of time, like just bump it up and get it out of the way. So I wonder if that is part of the prioritization process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's... Yeah, I might circle back with you to see how I can categorize that, so that could be like another way that we kind of have what things are short and long in here.
Okay.
Are there any other things to add or ask questions about?
I have a present. I found the sidewalk map. Right, and
Oh, yes, right.
Yes, and our
Is it
engineer has the electronic version of it, I believe, because the version of it was updated. And I took Mickey, our highway department head, through it, so he's got it now. And so I think we can actually, when we are ready for that discussion, we're going to have this map that says, here's the ones that we got.
I'm ready.
I kind of want to see the real deal. Like, can we roll it out on a?
If you want to come over after the council meeting, right? It took us a while. We kept saying, this exists somewhere.
I was starting to think it didn't exist.
I know.
Oh, that's great.
Cool.
Awesome.
Can I just add one other thing?
Sure, go ahead. Yep.
The Fishkill Creek protections might sound like, opening up a can of worms of ideas, but there's actually very specific new guidance from the state that local communities in the Hudson Valley are following, that we could be doing. And this is it's a topic we took up a year ago. It somehow fell off our agenda, but we had already discussed some of the ideas. And I think that when we do bring that up, I don't think it's going to take as long as people would expect. And also, there's at least one council member and at least one member of the CAC that are very well educated on this by attending the trainings from the state. And there's been a lot of discussion behind the scenes about, what are the possibilities, and everything really just kind of lines up on what the different proposals are for a water body protection overlay. So I just want to say it's not as big of it's not a small thing, but it's not as big of a thing as it may sound.
Right, yeah.
Did we have an update of the short-term rentals? Is that on this? I think it was on.
Yes, good, I did, and I might have taken it off this version of it only because I talked to Chris about trying to get that presentation, so. And I think, Chris, you said that maybe this spring, you were going to talk with Bruce about when he'd have capacity to do that.
Yeah, I think we're trying to get through a major upgrade to our software, which has been really difficult. And I would like to get through that before having Bruce turn back to this.
You should ask Central Hudson how to do that software upgrade. Perhaps related.
Good idea.
Perhaps related to that update on short-term rentals. One of the things that we also talked about was an agenda parking lot, a way for us to collectively, constructively place things in the future, receive comment on what we're doing in terms of future agenda.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I know it's late. Great, yes, we can bring that up as well. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is take some of these notes, kind of do an update on here. Even as I send it out, if you continue to see things, or members of the public are like, oh, I looked at this list, and what about this thing that I remember you talking about, or I have an idea around, and build this out. And then I will send it to all the council members, and the way it's worked past years, which worked, was that you'll rank your top 5, so you'll have to pick what's your top priority, and then your lowest priority of those 5, and then I'll do both individual, like how many council members picked that at all, and then ranked as well, so what was your 1, and use that and score up a point system. I'll talk to Amber too about this. It might be low, but it's important to us, and we can get it on. If you have more than 5, do include that. I might not do that for the purposes of the scoring, but I think it will just help us do this, and we'll, I say, present it. And then this might be something we pick up again later in the year, might wait until this time roughly next year, but we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah. Thanks for organizing this, Molly. I found it really helpful just to kind of think this through and see it all on paper, so appreciate your efforts.
Great.
Thank you.
I want to thank the mayor too for allowing this, because I had been on a previous, I don't remember having this opportunity.
Yeah, I
so
know.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
One sort of my broad piece of feedback or question is, I was talking to somebody in the CAC the other day about, as we take on these projects, it might be helpful for us to take the next step, especially for maybe our top 5 priorities, particularly around affordable housing, to start articulating what our goals and objectives are, so we know whether we're succeeding or not. I don't think that we should take the time to go into that level of detail on every single one, but maybe we pick our top 5 so that we can be tracking our progress on another level.
Good idea.
We want to do the bus service update? We okay? All right, last one. Oh, and then a map reveal if we're interested.
Maybe next time.
All right.
I want Ben to wheel it out like on a big platform, so we can all look at it.
Ben cannot be seen. He can only be heard. That's one of the secrets here.
So do you have a succinct bus service update?
Yes.
Okay.
Bus service is changing as of June 1st. We have 3 lines that go through the city: the B route, the F route, and the G route, which is also known as the free loop. We had been in conversations with the county after they did a study that had recommended that these 3 lines be merged into 1 line and cut pretty severely, and that was based on data from pre-COVID. We've had conversations with them since they started looking at doing the new routes. We did not get everything we wanted, but we did get significant enhancements, and I'm going to talk briefly about them, and then they are coming on March 28th at 5:30, and they're going to do a public outreach meeting here for this area. They don't do city councils because they'd have to do every town.
Yeah.
So they are going to do a public outreach meeting for Southern Dutchess, and that is just about fully confirmed. Right now, it's pretty close to confirmed.
And when you say here, do you mean this space or TBD?
in the courthouse, yeah.
And is that something they would be willing to, have videoed so people could watch it who can't make it?
Once we nail down the date, then I have to nail down the details.
Okay.
We would offer them the ability to do that. If Pete is available, we could certainly cover that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay.
So let me just give a quick overview. The B route currently runs from Beacon to Fishkill. It's important because that's where people go shopping. They basically added a lot of service to the B line. The B line has 8 additional trips per day. They also greatly augmented Saturday service, and they added stops like the Dutchess County Community College South Campus at the old Dutchess Mall, where they now have classes that you can take. So this this service basically can get you to Walmart, it can get you to class, and it can also get you to Amazon and the iPark for jobs. One of the downsides was it only ran till about 6 o'clock. Now it runs till about 10:30, so you can actually work a job and get home. The F line is I'm sorry, I just conflated that. That's the F line. The B line is what runs to Poughkeepsie, and it goes up Route 9, past Dutchess Stadium, it goes to the malls, South Hills and Galleria, and then it goes to Poughkeepsie. That has 8 additional trips per day, and it is now an hourly service on the half hour, and they actually augmented that schedule as well. On the F, they just extended the hours. They didn't do more trips, but they did add Saturday. And then on the G line, we had asked them to do Sunday service, which everybody wanted, and we did get that. They are now going to operate from 10 a.m. to 5:50 on Sundays. We also asked them, and I'm going to share my screen here, we have talked about for years the implementation of, this is from the Main Street Access Committee report, and the map in the upper right with the purple line basically shows the new route of the Loop bus. It becomes a Main Street trolley, a Main Street transit that frequently goes up and down Main Street. When they've done, when they looked at ridership, the ridership on other parts of the Figure 8 loop that currently exist did not warrant continuing the service. So we had to basically make a case, why does this continue? And we asked them to implement this and try this. This was John Clark's idea of trying to make this so that every 15 minutes the bus goes up and then the bus goes back 15 minutes later. It basically, you wouldn't need to know the schedule, you could just pick up the bus. So it's not, I would have liked it to go longer into the night. For cost reasons, they had to contain it. But I think it's a starting point, and we'll be having further conversations with them. But overall, for what we got out of this major update that they did across the county is a real improvement of transit services for people who depend on transit to go shopping, to get to work, to get to education, or to get from the train station up to Main Street. This will remain free, and we're also talking about the one thing that happened with the Loop is that the free bus no longer goes past Forrestal Heights. The other 2 lines do. So we're trying to figure out a system to bring to you to approve to subsidize the ridership from people who live in subsidized housing who, again, it's a 75-cent ride, but that can add up if you're riding it every day. It's not a lot for the city to cover. So we're trying to figure out a mechanism how to do that. If we can't get a pass of some sort through the county, we can basically just buy tickets that can be distributed by the housing authority. We didn't want that to be the impediment to trying a better system. I know there's some people in the mountain that are not happy that that's no longer going up to the mountain, but the ridership wasn't there to support transit. Transit has to have a certain number of riders or it fails.
I just, as someone who tried to depend on the Loop, I live right around the corner from that stop, and 3 times I tried to take it to work, and 3 times the Loop never even showed up. So it was rather undependable, and that's probably why there's low ridership up there. And I hope that, it sounds to me like the county did not take that into account, that the quality of the service could affect the ridership. So.
Yeah, and the quality of the service is important, and we'll be watching that as well. Lining it up with the train schedules hadn't happened, and now they're more aligned to meet the train. So we're hoping that they're simpler schedules, that they're better aligned, and they can meet the needs. Our highest ridership of the Loop was on Saturdays, and it was from the train station up Main Street. So we wanted to build on that and see what we could do on Sundays.
What are the hours, Monday through Saturday for the G-Line?
I think it's 6:30 or 6 o'clock to, I don't know.
They'll tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine in the morning, but then it leaves off at about 6 o'clock, which didn't make a lot of sense to me. But it did make sense when they explained that they had to get that bus somewhere else. We're part of a much broader system, so there were things that they had to take into account for us to continue that service.
I saw
And they
Chris.
can explain that. I mean,
Yeah.
when Amanda and Michael from Dutchess County Transit come, they can talk much more fluently than I can about this.
Yeah, this might also be a question for them. There was mention of a potential pilot with a smaller bus or electric bus? Is that something that the county is still debating, if that's even an option in the next couple of years?
The county got a federal grant for more than $400,000 to do a comprehensive study of how to either electrify its fleet or go to hydrogen. They are conducting that study now, and I have repeatedly said to them, I would love to be the pilot for a smaller bus that is more energy conscious. You know, again, these big buses, I come from Ulster County where we actually have smaller buses and we use electric vehicles. So I'm hopeful we're moving in that direction.
Great, thank you.
In terms of tracking, I just looked up and I was happy to see that they do have GPS trackers on the buses too.
Yeah.
There's a double map bus tracker app. That's pretty cool. That's just in terms of that service tracking. It's a potentially good option.
The app is useful, but it's newer.
Yeah, it's new.
And it is useful, but not if the bus just doesn't come.
Well, at least you maybe know it's not coming, I guess is my point, and then we can
Sure.
complain about it.
That doesn't, actually solve the service issue.
So again,
Both and.
I'll confirm when we have that date nailed down. It's 90% confirmed.
Dan, before I say it, do you have anything?
I'm all set tonight, thanks.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Oh, we have to mention our next
Oh,
meeting.
The next meeting of the council will be a formal meeting. That will be next Tuesday.
Because the
a week
holiday.
from today, because the Monday is Washington's birthday or
President's Day,
President's
yeah.
Day at 7 o'clock, all right? Thank you all very much. Good night.
Do we have to vote on
close
that
the
motion
meeting.
to adjourn?
Aye. Say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Good night, thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
Thanks, Christian.
Record.